Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to tonight's Reiki class, learning about the heart chakra. I am so grateful to be leading you all in this experience. I myself just got back from a heart chakra opening retreat, and I'll share a little bit about that retreat at the end of class tonight. But to begin, I'm going to actually ask that you set an alarm for 5 or 10 minutes. Do your own Gasho meditation, bringing the palms together, connecting with the breath, at least 3 deep breaths, and then taking the next 5 to 10 minutes to do your Gasho meditation. So you can go ahead and pause this video, come into your center. I'm letting you all begin to do this on your own versus me leading you through that. But know that I'll be right here, or know that I do my own Gasho meditation and did so and in order to create space for this class tonight. So feel free to go ahead and hit the pause button, set an alarm for 5 or 10 minutes, do your Gasho meditation. Also journal anything that is laid on the heart space tonight. Wonderful. So coming back to this space, fully comfortable, fully present and aware to learn about the heart chakra. So the heart chakra is the center of our rainbow bridge. We have our lower chakras that connect us down to the earth. We have our higher chakras that connect us up to consciousness. And we have that heart chakra in the center of our being that connects all of that, is the bridge between earth and spirit. And some basic issues of the fourth chakra related to love, balance, self-reflection, self-acceptance, relationship, intimacy, grief, compassion, and devotion. And shades of green. So yes, that heart chakra color is green. And the element that's related to the heart chakra is air. Anahata, or the unstruck, is the sutra name for the heart space. And the purpose of the heart space is love and balance and autonomy. And that autonomy is related to balance and love. So the location, of course, is the chest, but it's not necessarily like where the physical heart is located. It's really this whole area here is the chest, the heart space. And we identify this with our socialization, so how we relate to others, but also how we relate to ourselves. Orientation is self-acceptance and the acceptance of others. And the demon of the fourth chakra is grief. We're going to talk about that. We're going to focus on grief and the developmental stages, which is between 4 and 7 years old, and how it relates to forming peer and family relationships, developing the inner persona. So the basic right of the heart chakra is to love and be loved. Now, pay attention that there are 2 sides of that. To love, which is to give love, and to be loved, which is to receive love. And if the heart space is unbalanced, we're often good at doing one of those. Often it's the giving of love, but we're not so great at receiving. And we'll talk about that as well. So, healing practices that you can do for the heart space. Breathing exercise or pranayama. We did a little bit of that in last week's class, so I urge you to continue doing any form of breath work, and it will open the heart. A really easy one that I'll just teach you real quick. We'll try it together once at least. So a quick, easy pranayama practice is 4 even inhales in and a full exhale out. So it looks like this. I can already feel that beginning to open the heart space. So let's try that once together, and then I urge you to carry that on through into your practice this week. So again, 4 even breaths through the nose and exhale out the mouth. 4 even breaths. Here we go. And hopefully you can already begin to feel some space, some opening in the heart, and maybe even in the back, the upper back and shoulders. So pranayama. Other heart opening practices or healing practices, working with the arms, practice reaching out and taking. Often a yoga movement that I teach in my classes is to reach up like you're picking apples, and you're reaching up into consciousness, and you're reaching for love, and you're pulling it down, and you can even plant it into the heart space. And you can do the same thing by reaching down towards Mother Earth, pulling up that love and planting it into the heart space. Journaling and self-discovery. Psychotherapy, examining assumptions about relationships. Emotional release of grief. Forgiveness when appropriate. Inner child work. Codependency work. Self-acceptance. And all of those are things that you definitely, if you continue on your spiritual path, will definitely come to you when the time is right, or you can even feel the urge to seek them out. So we're going to move through some affirmations. I'm going to read them through once, and then I'll read them through again a little slower, and I'll encourage you to maybe pause and write down the one that sticks out to you the most. So just close your eyes, listen to the list the first time through, and then the second time I read it, you can write down the affirmation that calls to you the most, and you can use that again within your morning practice. I am worthy of love. I am worthy of love. I am loving to myself and others. I am loving to myself and others. There is an infinite supply of love. There is an infinite supply of love. I live in balance with others. I live in balance with others. I radically accept and love all of me. I radically accept and love all of me. So I'm going to read those through one more time, and this time write down the one that calls to you the most. I am worthy of love. I am worthy of love. I am loving to myself and others. I am loving to myself and others. There is an infinite supply of love. There is an infinite supply of love. I live in balance with others. I live in balance with others. I radically accept and love myself. I radically accept and love myself. Beautiful. So take a few more moments, finish writing down your affirmation and any other notes on the heart space. So one of the things my heart space loves, and I'm going to share this with you, is my meditation bowl, my singing bowl, and just any sound therapy. There's even a lot of great options on YouTube. You can just look up healing sound therapy or even Reiki music, and those things will pop up. And often I'll just put one of those on as I'm going to bed. So I'm receiving that as my unconscious is unwinding. So I'm giving it that love. So I'm going to start us out before we begin our reading here with some sound healing. We may live in a culture obsessed with power, but we are driven by the need for love. The basic right of the heart chakra, to love and be loved, is simple, profound, and direct. Sadly, this chakra is easily damaged, diminished, or wounded. These wounds have profound importance as they wound both spirit and soul. They affect both the mind and the body and impact the very core of the self. This is why if you're ever reading an individual, Boysen scanning, anything along those lines, and you're not quite sure where to start, just begin with their heart space. So that's the easiest, because again, it affects all the chakras affect all the other ones, but this one right here in the center has an equal ability to affect both the upper and the lower chakras. So why is love so elusive when it is so simple? Literature abounds with sages of love and its loss, sages we know only too well from personal experiences. Nothing is quite so uplifting as the flowering of love. Nothing so devastating as its loss. A deeply archetypal experience. Love is the force that runs our lives. We cannot live without it, yet the world is crying for lack of it. All forms of child abuse are in fact travesties of love. They are travesties because they are not a complete absence of love, but an absence of healthy, rightful love. How many children have been spanked and abused, sexually molested, punished severely, smothered or overmanaged while being told, "This is because I love you so much." Travesties of love occur when the most needed element of life is twisted and torn, withheld and used as a means of control. Without knowing what healthy love looks like, we have a hard time creating it in our lives. We hang on to mere shreds of love, sacrificing ourselves on its altar, run in fear when we find it. Instead, we are turning towards the opposite of love, warfare and violence. Television violence models behavior for our children, and gangs provide many of our youth with their only sense of belonging and community. Adolescents in my practice tell me that cruel is cool. And to be a man, you have to be mean. On a single day in America, 270,000 children carry guns to school, and guns are now surpassing automobiles as the #1 killer. Is this not a travesty of love? Political agendas cut funds for the downtrodden and the needy, the immigrants and children, while the defense budget soars. It is alarming enough that our political leaders embody this value system. More alarming still, to contemplate the number of people who support them. What kind of cultural mythos is driving such a value? Myths are the cultural stories of our origins and our purpose. Unconsciously, these stories influence and may even rule our lives. They define what is possible, shape who we are, and lead us to what can be. Myths are a statement of the primal relationship that exists between the archetypal elements in the universe and their counterparts in our own psyches. In the prevailing mythos, we are children of divorce. The Great Mother, a fundamental archetype of the psyche, was worshipped as a living deity for at least 25,000 years during the Paleolithic and Neolithic periods of human history. She is archetypal ancestress to us all, her memory buried deeply in the collective unconscious. She mirrors our early childhood experience of our own mothers and embodies the archetypal imprint of the mothering source: nurturance, nourishment, containment, and connection. Our home before we come home to ourselves. In the collective mind of Western civilization, she has long been forgotten. Removed from our predominant mythology, she is conspicuous in her absence. She is only just beginning to resurface through the growing goddess movement. Recent archaeology research and the popularity of Jungian archetypal psychology. She is the mother we have lost and are only just beginning to find again. She is the archetypal feminine at the primal origin of our cultural history. In her absence, the Great Father has become the sole protagonist in our dominant mythology. He is strong and powerful, but distant and ethereal. He is without a wife or daughter and is estranged from all that the feminine archetype represents. His immediate son has been crucified, ostensibly for the sins of the children. In the divorce settlement, we are the motherless children who are taken to live with the father. In our new household, mother was not to be discussed and became forgotten. We have inherited the myth of a broken home. We are the motherless children in our distant father's house, trying to find wholeness in a world that is longing for the magic and mystery of love. This is our story. These are our parents. We are the children of the unacknowledged marriage. No wonder we have such a yearning for romantic love. No wonder the myths of man meets woman and lives happily ever after pervades our collective fantasies, rendering other forms of love completely unrecognizable. If we were children of an intact and loving mythical home, a partnership, mythology, we might seek union from an experience of cooperation, rather than through a compulsive need to complete our diminished selves through another. Our predominant myth is one of separation. We see ourselves as separate from nature, separate from each other, and separate from the divine. Separation are created by race, class, gender, and age. Individuals are endowed with the moral right, even encouragement to do whatever is necessary to further their own individual existence. The environment and its cohabitants are sacrificed for individual needs. Wealth and class create even more separation, more privacy, more individualism, more walls, more boundaries. We have created vast separation between men and women, and further separation between women, and between men and men. Love is the all-pervasive glue of the universe. It is culturally restricted to the bonds of limited heterosexual dyads, and their often lonely offspring. The model is obviously flawed, for our children are abused and our marriages repeat the pattern of our mythical parents, with epidemic of divorce. Collectively, it seems we are falling out of love with the world. We all know what deep pain we feel when we fall out of love. It pierces the very core of our being, carves a deep hole in the soul, and wounds and cripples the living spirit. In our disconnection, we can barely relate to all the tragedies occurring in the world. Is it because the very art of relating is becoming a lost art? Is this because the time it takes to relate deeply, feel fully, and communicate and understand is no longer valued as time well spent? We are becoming alienated, hostile, defensive, self-centered, and compulsively consuming. The result is isolation, constriction, and limitation. The ground that holds us becomes shaky, and the energy that evolves us is restricted to traditional patterns that support the myth of separation. In our isolation, we are lost from our spiritual core, lost from the heart. To cross the rainbow bridge connecting heaven and earth is to consciously reconnect several parts of the world. It is to anchor the myth of individualism in the necessary grounding of self, while simultaneously expanding that self into a conscious unity with the world around us, socially, ecologically, and mythically. To access the divine and become as gods and goddesses, we need to recognize our own divine nature as part of the greater mystery of unfolding. To heal the heart is to reunite mind and body, the mystical and mundane, self and others into an integrated whole. This is our task in the heart chakra, as it is the task for every one of us that wants to heal this world and assure its future. Without love, there is no binding force to hold our world together. Without love, there is no integration, but instead disintegration. Without love, our rainbow bridge collapses in the middle, and we fall into the chasm of separation below. So moving forward, some of the things to keep in mind are the mysteries of love. For one human being to love another human being, that is perhaps the most difficult task that has been entrusted to us. The ultimate task, the final test and proof, the work for which all other work is merely preparation. And to that, I would like to speak on the fact that we do hold romantic love at such a higher value than the value of a good, solid friendship with both same sex and opposite sex. And same thing with a teacher who can guide us along our path, having admiration for them. They might even become somewhat like a parent to us, an authority figure, but hopefully it's a mutual love relationship, all of these relationships. And as I'm growing older in my life, not super old, but older, I'm coming to learn that all kinds of relationships are just as important as a romantic partner, and that I also don't always need to have that romantic partner in my life to be happy and loved. And I truly had to come to that point by learning how to love myself. And as you're going on this journey, especially moving through the chakras, as you learn more and more about yourself, you can learn to radically accept and love yourself. Mm-hmm. Other concepts to keep in mind are balance and intimacy, self-reflective consciousness, mind and body connection, and relationships with others, reaching out and taking in. So like I mentioned earlier, it is quite difficult to keep the heart balanced because we tend to maybe be reaching for things that aren't necessarily for us. And when we don't get them, we feel a lack of love. Sometimes that lack can continue to grow to the point where, as we move through the development stages of love between ages 4 and 7, we can also learn to simply give and really never receive. Or we can learn to receive, and not really give back. But often it's the first option that happens the most, which is, and this is between men and women, all sexes, all sexuality, we're eager to give, but then it's really hard for us to receive. So I encourage you to this week look into your own heart space and decide if that's true or not for you. Are you able to give and receive love, or are you just mostly giving? So that is the yin and yang balance that is necessary for the heart chakra to be balanced. Love alone is capable of uniting living beings in such a way as to complete and fulfill them. For it alone task takes them and joins them by what is deepest in themselves. And if that is what it can achieve daily on a small scale, why should it not repeat this one day on worldwide dimensions? And another concept is attachment and freedom. Big one to move through. But for the rest of class, we are going to learn about the developmental stages. I haven't focused much on this in the other chakras, but with this one, I really think it's important to kind of look back and dive into that family history, so to speak, and look at how you learn to love and look at what example that you had. So this starts off with a little story from the author talking about her own son. When Alex was about 5, he came down with a stomach flu. This kept him in bed for a couple of days, and he was sick to his stomach. I was not about to force him to eat, but wanted him to have some nourishment, if he wanted it. So I prepared some toast, left it on a plate next to his bed, and tucked him in with his teddy bear. He soon recovered, and the incident was forgotten. A few weeks later, when I was taking an afternoon nap, I woke up to find a plate of awkwardly buttered toast placed on my night table and a teddy bear on the pillow next to me. This was a true sign that he was moving through the heart chakra stage. The 4th chakra developmental stage begins when the child moves from the intense egocentricity and willfulness of the 3rd chakra into a readiness to meet and cooperate with others. This generally begins between 3 and 4 years of age. After autonomy and basic impulse control have been established, it may happen suddenly when the seemingly impossible child spontaneously does something sweet and kind for someone else. A child may also swing back to the stubborn willfulness at a 3.5 before finally moving on to the more loving and harmonious heart chakra stage at around 4 years. In the uncertainty of new behavior, a child often runs back to familiar patterns for security. Development is not always smooth. As we climb further up the chakras, the exact timing of the developmental stages becomes less specific. It depends in part on the successful resolution of previous stages, which varies from case to case, and the variations widen as we get higher. Unfortunately, many people do not reach the upper chakra stages at all, or do so only later in life. So for now, we're going to discuss childhood, but know that there's also a portion that discusses adult development. And we're just going to move through the childhood portion. If you'd like to have a call with me this week, you can set that up, and we can talk about the adult developmental stages for heart chakra. In childhood, 4th chakra development marks the formation of our social identity, also known as the persona. This is the aspect of self that we create to win love, gain social approval, and get along in the larger world. In the 4th chakra, we no longer see the world entirely in terms of our own needs. And so our relationships expand from being specifically one-on-one with our parents, so mother, child, child, father, to include larger family social structures. The child now finds that she's part of mommy and daddy's relationship with each other, and that she has brothers and sisters, classmates, neighbors, and friends of her very own. The verbal messages that were internalized during the 3rd chakra stage centered around action and behavior. Now, in the 4th chakra stage, it is the parent-child relationship itself that becomes internalized. It is not only the messages dad continually gives us about being noisy in the house, but also the context of dad's relationship with us that becomes important. If the message was given in the context of fear, then we feel fear along with the internalized message. How we behave and who we become is shaped by the way we internalize our basic family relationships. So thinking into that, this applies to both your one-on-one relationship with your mom and your one-on-one relationship with your dad and how that was internalized. I actually got to work through that intensely during the heart opening retreat this weekend, which was amazing and also painful. So moving on, the verbal messages that were internalized during the third chakra stage, again, center around action and behavior. Eric Berne outlined these internal relationships in his theories of transitional analysis, which describes how we operate from internalized parent, adult, or child scripts. If we rebel against dad's messages, we are playing the script of the naughty child with a critical parent, and aspects of it become part of our internal dialogue. Throughout life, we may find both roles simultaneously clamoring for the driver's seat, as sometimes we will be led by rebellious urges, while at others we will be held back by our inner critic. We also repeat these relationships with others. If a friend criticizes you, then may suddenly become your critical parent, and you find yourself reacting like a naughty child instead of listening to what they have to say. Children internalize relationships by imitation. A child who is frequently scolded may be overheard scolding her doll or even her best friend. Alex, my son, was imitating his mother when he brought me the toast. This imitation is called identification and forms the core of the relationship program. Identification is where the child adopts the beliefs, attitudes, values, and behaviors of others and then carries these attitudes into their relationships. As gender roles get internalized, we develop our gender identification. Watching how parents, brothers, or sisters behaves gives us our first models of how to be boys or girls. As we watch our big sisters play with dolls or put on makeup, so we watch our brothers play with trains or lizards, watch our mother give herself over to the needs of the family, and see our fathers relentlessly pursue his career, we are, for better or worse, developing gender orientation behavior programs. It is here that we take on gender roles. This is the age where boys are told not to cry and when girls are told to be nice. This splitting and repression of masculinity and femininity comes to the fore again in midlife, when our inside development leads us into some kind of personal crisis. As stated earlier, heart chakra work includes the reintegration of anima and animus. The child internalizes not only the relationship he has with his parents, but also the entire family system. We may become an eldest child with new siblings, removed from the center of attention he once held. He may realize he is the youngest of many siblings and learn to social identify from the way his brothers and sisters treat him. Or he may be the middle child that has to compete for attention. These dynamics took a back seat in the "it's all about me" stage in the third chakra, but emerges as part of the personality at the fourth chakra stage. We then play with this family dynamic in the social arenas of school, work, clubs, and families we form as adults. As the growing child joins the family dynamic, he takes on roles such as that of good child, scapegoat, hero, clown, or the lost child, just to name a few. These roles are like steps in a dance, unconscious patterns that form our social identities. What may begin as the conscious cultivation of a certain behavior, mommy likes it when I make her laugh, may grow into a lifelong role, playing the clown. The development of social identity prepares the child for more complex interactions with the larger world. This requires a delicate balance between maintaining and relinquishing autonomy, a delicate balance between maintaining, which should have developed in the third chakra. For the child whose autonomy is weak, there is a tendency to be swept away by others, be defined by them, or live in fear of losing the self. A kindergartner may steal someone else's cookies simply because his friend told him to, not realizing that it was his own urge until he gets in trouble for it. Then he says, "But Billy told me to do it." A child whose will was overly indulged may be too self-centered and may get rejected by others, such as the school bully who dominates the younger children or the egocentric classmate who always steals the center of attention. Intellectual development also takes a monumental leap at this stage. We have entered Piaget's preparational period where intellectual development proceeds into the conceptual symbolic rather than in the early sensory motor arena. Having mastered the basic building blocks of language, the child now begins to take on assembling the many pieces of their experience. The child is interested in relationships not only between people, but among all the components of the world around them. They are learning to assemble raw information into larger concepts that dictate behavior. Instead of using helpfulness as just a way to receive a cookie, they realize that helpfulness is a good concept in general. They then want recognition for even intentions as opposed to just the simple act. So instead of saying, good job, you get a cookie, or you would more say, oh, you are such a good helper all of the time. Here, you want a cookie? So yeah, this is the development of good boy, nice girl, the moral development. The child is creating themselves by incorporating new concepts into their growing personality. And finally, we'll get into routines. These are sets of relationships. Routines are sets of relationships. Children at this age often get upset when a standard routine is disrupted, such as getting a bath before dinner instead of after, which is the norm for them. And sometimes when stability in the household is disrupted. For example, the introduction of step-parents, other siblings, new households, or changes in the daily routine of school or daycare can be especially disruptive at this stage. Security and identity are derived from stable relationships. When those relationships end or are threatened, as through divorce, death, or separation, then the sense of security and developing social identity can be threatened. The internalized relationship with ourselves is simultaneously affected. If we lose one of our parents, for example, we do not get to see how the two genders actually interact with each other, and hence we may not have that balance within ourselves. With some marriages, however, this is really a blessing in disguise. Finally, this is the age when peer relationships begin developing. A child enters school, chooses friends, and tries out these behavior programs in the world outside the family. The child learns whether she is well-liked or rejected, and thus their social identity gets added onto the ego identity as the new basis for self-esteem. It is interesting that the most common time for imaginary playmates occurs between ages 4 and 6, as if this were a practice realm for real relationships. I actually haven't thought about my own imaginary friends in a long time. Since relationships are the formative ground for fourth chakra development, it is important to ask some basic questions. And if you would like, I'll read these slowly, and I encourage you to pause and journal to answer these questions. And there's several of them, so you can always listen to them all the way through and then rewind and come back to this segment. It's going to tell me the minute. Nope. So those questions are, do relationships in the family depend on aggressive fighting for one's rights? Do they depend on giving up oneself to avoid punishment or rejection? Do they involve the expression of emotions and affection? Or do the parents hide this aspect of their own relationship? Is communication modeled so that the child sees how problems get worked through, or is it the rule to not talk about anything difficult? It was definitely a rule in my house to not talk about anything difficult. Does one parent dominate the other, or is there a sense of cooperation and union in partnership? Are brothers and sisters given equal attention, or is there favoritism? And if so, on what is it based? Most of all, is there consistency in relationships? Is daddy warm and giving on some days and cruelly abusive on others? These are the elements that teach the child how to behave in the world. Erickson has described the stage as being the struggle of initiative versus guilt. building on the previous stage of autonomy versus shame. Autonomy gives rise to initiative in the form of reaching out towards others. Shame inhibits this reaching out and inhibits the awakening of the heart chakra. If the child lacks initiative, then she becomes dependent upon the reactions of others and will play a passive role in most relationships. Successful handling of this stage, according to Erickson, results in direction and purpose. Socialization is where an individual acquires behavioral patterns, motivations, attitudes, and values that the culture deems important. In our current social structure, this process requires that we deny many aspects of our lower chakras. To be properly socialized, the child needs to learn to control or rise above her spontaneous aggressive urges, dependencies, and fears. For males, this may also include the emotions in general and learning how to emote. Thus, the social identity often develops at the cost of previous identities. For the child whose social identity is about pleasing others, for example, the cost may be a denial of their own needs. The lost child who hides in the background denies his needs for attention, loss of contact with the original ground, creates a kind of existential emptiness for that then gets projected onto relationships. We end up looking to others for security, emotional fulfillment, or ego enhancement because we have denied these things within ourselves. This development often leads to codependency in relationships, feeling like you can't exist without another. Between chakra 3 and 4, so solar plexus and heart, the child may get the message that autonomy and love are an either-or phenomenon. This is particularly true when conditional love is used to modify behavior. Johnny soon learns that behavior pleases mommy and what aspects of himself are met with rejection. Mommy ignores me when I cry, but she holds me when I'm quiet. We grow up believing we can either be ourselves or we can be loved, and think it is impossible to have both at the same time. When you can change the concept of in the mind, and this is often in the unconscious mind, but ask yourself if perhaps that's what you believe. Do you believe that you can have freedom, or do you believe that you can have love, or do you believe that you can have both at the same time? Meaning, do you actually feel free to be yourself and receive love? When we get a stronger foundation in our lower 3 chakras, which we can simply do through the healing work of Reiki, and it's one way to do it, there's many ways, but as that grows stronger and we especially work on the autonomy that can come through the work of the solar plexus and the sacral chakra, then we can begin to learn to love ourselves. And when we do that, we can begin to show up in the world as our full authentic self, and we can begin to show up as our true self. And this, simply by beginning to show up as your full self, can then lead you to your purpose and your direction on this planet. Excuse me. I do have a firm belief that we all have the ability to connect with that guidance, the ability as we move through our practices to really love ourselves. And when you're doing your practices, allow yourself to do them for yourself. Allow yourself to do them so that you can begin healing one chakra at a time, one chakra at a time. So whether that be through the movement of yoga or Tai Chi, breath work, therapy, mind, body, and spirit, they're all important. They're also very important. So for here, I am going to close out our practice, and I'll encourage you to bring your hands together. If you want to pause the video again and close out with maybe giving yourself some chakra love in that heart space, practicing the symbol, then you can do that. Know that I see you, I feel you, and I love you just the way that you are. Namaste.